Video blog.
Hey there, this is Tim from Twice Circled, and welcome to episode 10 of the official Megaquarium video blog. Today we have a slightly different episode. It's a Q&A session, so I have collected a load of questions off of Reddit, YouTube, and Twitter, and I'm going to be basically just answering them, and in the background you can just see some pre-recorded gameplay footage. So let's get to the first question. This one comes from Pinstar. He's at Pinstar on Twitter. He's actually a YouTuber who does videos, let's plays on kind of tycoon style games and other types of games. So yeah, if you like tycoon games, then feel free to check him out. That's Pinstar. And he asks, what aspects of building the game seem relatively easy this time, but were a real struggle with Big Pharma? Yeah, it's an interesting question. Honestly, nothing is like that much easier. I'd say the main thing is to do with the way I've set up the structure of the code. So not really about the game design at all, but basically the way I've set up the simulation is a lot more methodical and better designed this time around, so I'm able to be a lot more productive when I'm creating new things for the game. But in terms of the design, I'm finding actually just as many interesting design issues that I'm struggling with, but that's all part of it. And I've got to say that this might not be clear from watching Megaquarium at the moment because it's still relatively early on, but in my opinion it's a much more ambitious game than Big Pharma. I think the scope is so much more broad and there's so much more potential for interesting interactions because there's so many more little actors in the game, like the staff and the guests, etc. And I think it's a much more freeform game, and so well, not much more. It's a little more freeform. I think Big Pharma is freeform too, and all that makes it a really interesting but difficult design space to work within. Pip, who is at Tiny Pixels, it's funny doing shout out to all these video creators. Pip is a streamer over at Twitch. She's at Twitch TV/Tiny Pixels. So yeah, feel free to check her out too. She asks, what level of fish care are you hoping to ultimately include? Will it just be putting fish in a tank, or will there be ongoing care? So yeah, the aim is definitely to have both, and I think both already exist, but I totally understand the question because at the moment I think the ongoing care side of things isn't very clear, it's not very well developed. So I would divide it up into basically static requirements, which are things like the tank itself, the filters, the other equipment, heaters and coolers to get the temperature right, potentially ozoners and protein skimmers to also help with water quality. And then of course you've got things like the scenery and the decorations, which are also kind of static requirements. Things like they determine how much room there is to swim, which some fish might want, like sharks could want that, and other fish might want hiding places. So those are all static requirements, and that's great because you know what you need to do from the offset. But I also do want to have these dynamic requirements, and I think the focus with these is around the managing of the staff, because I think that's where the interesting gameplay comes from. So obviously feeding is a good example of this, and while it might seem quite simple in its current form, there's definitely ways to develop that. So my plan is to have different types of food. So the rarer, more exotic fish, they might want kind of frozen food, which has to be chopped up and prepared at a special workstation by the staff before it's given. Perhaps it needs to have extra supplements added to it, and that's another chest that you need to place down in a good spot so that your staff can get to it easily. And so yeah, that's going to just hopefully all feed into this whole laying out logistical nightmare you're having to deal with. There's also the potential for things like medicine, and I definitely just need to do more research into this and try and work out what other stuff aquarists spend their days doing, and try and include as much of that as possible. But yeah, definitely I want it to be 50-50. It's not just the static, it's definitely I want there to be just as much dynamic requirements that you're having to give during the day, because hopefully that'll keep the game fresh, because otherwise it might be one of these things where you just build your thing and then you just leave them forever. That's definitely not the way I want it to be. Okay, next question. Christopher via YouTube, this is just left as a comment on the last video, and he asks, are we making large tanks like the ones with a tunnel you walk through? Quick answer to this one, yeah, totally. definitely be tanks with tunnels in. I'm thinking tanks could be much larger than the ones you're currently seeing. There's no reason why they couldn't be kind of 8 by 8, maybe even 10 by 10 squares, and all different shapes and sizes. To be honest, that's not really a challenge at all. It's just a case of getting it made up by my artist. So the reason I haven't spent much time on that at the moment is just because I think there's so many more difficult design decisions that I need to kind of work out first. Once it gets to the point of just making extra tanks, that's quite easy to add. His next question is, are you adding possibilities for sumps? This is obviously a aquarium fanatic, or different methods of filtration. And if sumps or very large tanks, is there an option that there'll be some sort of plumbing? So yeah, I have some plans in this area. I like the idea of having pipes. So I'm actually going to not exactly scrap, but I'm going to add to the current system where you just have to add your filters next to the tanks. This system of pipes. So you have to connect those filters to the tanks via a pipe. What's really cool about this is it also allows the possibility of connecting multiple pieces of equipment together with your pipes so they form one large system. So you could have at the moment you've got the mechanical and the biological filtration together, but what if you split those off into 2 separate filters plus a protein skimmer plus an ozoner, maybe a heater or a chiller, and together you kind of modularize, you kind of create your own system via these modular components. And final cherry on top, you can actually connect multiple tanks together, and so you could have, say, one really efficient set of filters and stuff connected to many small tanks and sharing all those water parameters between them. So loads of freedom in terms of how you want to design your aquarium. That is all to come. Okay, next question. Now this is Spaceman Zero asked via Reddit. And he's got a few questions here, so I'm going to try and go through them relatively quickly. He asks about maintenance and repair. He asks if I plan on adding wear and tear to the machinery and tanks, so they may get broken. You may need to have your employees have repair and maintenance skills to help with that. Yeah, I think this is a great idea. I think I'll probably end up having a separate type of employee who's a kind of engineer / mechanic, and one of the ideas I've already got is perhaps the filters. If you don't clean them out regularly enough, they get blocked and they lose a bit of power. Well, if you leave that for too long, eventually that will completely break the filter, meaning you get 0 filter capacity, which would be disastrous for your tanks. His second question is about education and training. You plan on implementing some kind of speciality training that is needed to take care of the more rare / higher cost fish? Or is it just up to the player to make sure he or she tends the tank conditions / fish demands, and the employees just take care of feeding and cleaning? It's a really good question, and I haven't decided yet. I feel like it would be good if it wasn't in a really kind of lame way, just kind of like you need to have this this employee just having this skill to look after this type of fish. I mean, that's okay, but what would be really cool if it was actually a skill that the employee needed to do. So for example, stick feeding is a great example of this. It's actually when you feed your sharks or kind of carnivorous fish directly using a stick, and because it's actually a task the staff needs to do, I think it makes complete sense that the staff needs to learn that, and until they've learned that, you wouldn't be able to have that type of fish in your aquarium because they'd just starve. You wouldn't be able to feed them. So I think that would be really, really cool. But whether I have it like your staff needs to have the angelfish skill before you can buy angelfish, I'm not sure. That seems a bit heavy-handed. He also asks about storage and equipment orders. He thinks many tycoons make themselves too easy by allowing the player to instantly place new structures and equipment without delay, as long as you have enough money. He thinks it would be more tactical if there was a small order time, like 1 to 3 days, depending on the equipment availability until it arrives in the aquarium. It's a really interesting idea. Once again, it's something I thought about an awful lot during development. Where I am currently is I think it'd be too much of a barrier to progress, and it'd be frustrating having to wait through several days for stuff to turn up. In terms of, say, building like a new tank or something like that. Where I think it would be really cool is actually ordering maybe equipment, not necessarily filters and stuff like that, but equipment for your staff to use. So for example, the buckets that they use to feed or to carry water around, perhaps you have to order those in, and they could take a little bit of time to turn up. And so you've got to kind of manage demand for those items. You might start off with one, but then as you add a couple more staff, they all need to use the same piece of equipment at the same time, so you need to order these things in, and then you have a little bit of an issue, an efficiency issue, and that is, I kind of describe as more of a soft block. It's decreasing the efficiency of the way your staff can work, but it's not stopping you doing anything. Right, next question about employee satisfaction and working shifts. Do you plan on adding some kind of employee well-being features to the game, like staff break rooms and restrooms? I'd also love it if it wasn't possible to spam employees instantly, but they would arrive over the next day or two. This is interesting. I definitely want to have some kind of mood for the employees, just like we have for the fish, and all sorts of things are feeding to that. You know, if fish die, they'll become unhappy. If they work too hard, maybe they'll become unhappy. If they ask for a pay rise and you say no, they might become unhappy. I haven't decided about what kind of staff rooms and toilets and that sort of stuff for the staff, because I'm just not sure yet if it's where I want to focus a lot of the attention. I think maybe you guys let me know, but I feel like it's more exciting to be building the actual aquarium, so I'm not sure whether I'll do that. It's interesting you mentioned about this thing about not being able to spam them instantly, but they would arrive the next day or two. It's similar to the one before. I like this idea of there being stock levels, like certain pieces of equipment, and certainly employees would fall under this too, would only come out over time. So they'd only, in the menu, they'd be unavailable, and then they'd appear every 5-10 minutes of gameplay. Like the rarer pieces of equipment would be the same, the rarer fish would be the same. And this would be cool, another kind of, in quotes, soft block rather than a hard block, in that you can, you have to kind of play around these slight restrictions on what you can have. You can't just have unlimited of everything, but it doesn't stop you progressing. You can still have you can build as many as you like of the less rare items, But so I do like this idea of of limited stock and that coming out over the time, but still with you being able to access it instantly, because that lets the player just keep playing. And I think it's more instant, the gratification you get from laying stuff down. Okay, his final question is about early access or beta. Been asked this a few times, so I thought it'd be a good one to answer. He asks, are you planning on doing an early access period or closed/open beta closer to the release? My current plan is to do a closed beta. Right now, I don't think I'm going to be doing a paid open early access. That may change, but that's just my plan at the moment. I see examples of games that do early accesses and they're not quite ready, and that scares me basically as a developer and as a designer, and I'm very keen that the first time this game is available for money, it's going to be really, really good. So it's not the current plan, but don't hold me to it. I'm not making any promises either way, but that's just to let you guys know what I'm thinking. Okay, and now new person, Celine S. Salve. Sorry if I've pronounced that wrong. I know you follow me on Twitter, Celine, and respond to quite a lot of stuff. So apologies if I got that wrong. She asks, is there a formula to get character rewards between frustratingly hard and boringly easy, or do you have to play it by ear? So by character rewards, I guess she means kind of the rate at which you gain points and the rate at which things kind of progress. I think that's what she means, because she asked this same question on YouTube, and that's what I think she meant when she asked it there. This is something I generally play by ear. Right now, I'm not that focused on balancing, because every single mechanic you add is going to affect the balance, and so if you balance too early, you just waste your time. But I do actually is on the cost of the items that you buy. I actually have a little formula to work those out. So the fish that start with higher stats automatically cost more. The staff that have better skills, they have a higher salary. The tanks that are larger and have more viewing positions cost more. And that's quite useful. And then you can tweak those parameters to make sure that it's all relative and it stays balanced. So I use formulas, but I haven't actually got it perfectly balanced yet. I guess that's the answer. Andres Iles, who's at Prog Orion on Twitter, asks, how do you scale, this is the last question by the way, how do you scale the different aspects of the game, such as demand, price on the angle of time? You could talk about market simulation. So I didn't really I think basically maybe he's referring more to Big Pharma than Megaquarium here, and he was just asking about the market simulation in that. So I'm very happy to talk about that. Now with Big Pharma, I started from a place of supply versus demand, just because it's a really easy concept to get one's head around. More supply, lower price; more demand, higher price. And then in the DLC, marketing and malpractice, I actually turned this on its head. I made it a little more complicated. So the player set the price, and then from that I calculated the demand. And this was kind of tricky, actually, coming up with a good way of doing this. And the best way I can do it really is just by describing to you how I came up with the idea. And that was basically via a series of test cases. I do this sort of thing quite a lot if I'm coming up with some kind of formula. I try to work out the result that I want it to have under a certain set of conditions, and then it's just a case of filling in the middle bit, working out the maths that make those conditions turn into that result. It's kind of like algebra. Anyway, so the first test case is pretty obvious, right? You've got a single product on the market. It's going to have 100% of the demand. If you've got two products on the market of equal value, they're going to have 50% each. Okay, so far very trivial. It starts getting a little tricky when you have two or more products with different values. And when I say value, I'm actually including the price into that. So the way Big Pharma works is that the value of a product is based on the sales rating of it, and then it's adjusted up and down based on the price. So the cheaper you sell it, essentially you're increasing the value of the proposition. The more expensive you make it, the lower the value, right? So yeah, it gets more hard when you've got products of different value. And so basically the way I do it is, the easiest way to imagine it is like, imagine a bar chart with two products, one of them is half as high as the other. And this bar chart stretches up to some kind of nominal value of like 100%. So basically the way it works is if you divide the chart up into sections based on which products are in that section of value, and then each of those products divides the demand across that section. God, this is not very clear at all. So let me just give you an example. It's probably easier. And something else I should mention is the final test case that there's also this issue of how do you if a product isn't very good, it shouldn't get all of the market, because otherwise it'd be too easy to game from a gameplay perspective, that you could release a really bad product and it would automatically get 100% of the demand. So what we do is we have this nominal value of product value, call it 100%. And then if a product, you say you've got two products, one of them which is 50% of that value, and the other one is 25% value. How do you divide up the demand if you've got 100 chips, right? 100 bits of demand. How do you divide those up among those two products? Now, the first thing you do is you say, well, 50% is just not being catered to at all because neither of these products is good enough. So you just 50% of the chips you throw away. You've got 50 left. And you've got the better product, which is at 50% value. And it's 25% better than, it's 25 chips better than the one at 25. So it gets those 25 chips, so it's got 25% of the demand basically. And then the final lower echelon is they're below the 25 value mark. You've got the two products sharing it basically, and so they each get 12.5 chips each. And so what you finally get, if you crunch all the numbers, what you get is in this position where you have a product with a value of 50 and a product with a value of 25 out of a maximum of 100. One of them gets 37.5% of the demand, and one of them gets 12.5%. So the first one was 25 plus 12.5. And that's actually exactly how the demand system works in Big Pharma. So there we go. You asked. It was a little bit wordy, a little bit mathsy, but there you go. Okay, so there we go. That's just me talking for 20 minutes. I hope you learned something, and you found the gameplay in the background fun to watch. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and I will talk to you again next week. Bye-bye.